Greetings, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started in just another moment or so, get the opportunity for other folks to join us. So hang in there. We'll give it another minute or two. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. We have a pretty full agenda, so I just want to get a jump start and hopefully other folks can join us today. Thanks everyone for joining in for our last subcommittee meeting. We are hopefully going to be diving into this report and getting it finalized to send over to the work group. I'm just going to go through the folks that I see attending on the screen so far. We have Chuck Gilbert, Ken Eklund, Nate Tisdale, Ian McNabb, Maren Shermer, and Mark Eager. And we have myself, Daniel Reddick with Benton County. And that's for the folks joining in via recording. Okay, hopefully Sam Imperati, the group facilitator, will be able to join us later on. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and jump in here. So we'll focus on sort of the group's priorities so that we can get through this document today. So I'm going to ask the group where maybe in terms of like major sections where you want to draw our attention, just keeping in mind that areas that we don't get to might not be able to either be included in the report or the final proposals might not be into the report. So I just want to give the group the opportunity to draw our attention to where it's needed most. And I just want to also call out, we have Ginger Richardson joining in as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm looking for proposals on where to start. I'll just quickly go through the the three areas that we already know need work. We have Appendix D on the list, definitions and common terms, introduction and conclusion areas, and I'm sure there are a few others. So let's open up the table for any areas of interest that we want to draw our attention to. Yeah, Ken.
Why don't we do Appendix D? Because I think that'll go fairly quickly, or at least I assume so. I don't know where we're at. Ginger, I think the ball is in your court. Yeah.
Okay. Does that feel good to the group to focus on Appendix D?
So, hi, sorry, everybody. I was running from a different call. So yes, Ken is correct. He did send me Appendix D over the weekend. Thank you very much. I have to apologize. I did not have an opportunity to give it as much of a detailed line by line read through as I would have liked. I did read it, but I just got tied up with baseball tournaments and gymnastics meets and my kids' schedule and stuff like that. So I can say generally, I really appreciate Ken's rewrite of the appendix. I think it moves it much closer to a space that Republic Services would be able to accept some, if not all of it. I think there's still some things that we would like to address. And I know, Ken, you had sent me an email on Sunday afternoon talking about landfill gas to energy. And I know that Bill, you had started a paragraph and had asked me to look at it, and I have not yet done so. If the rest of the group wants to kind of briefly, Ken, if you want to kind of briefly go through what you did, I can commit to the group to getting my detailed feedback on this to them within, with by this afternoon. I just have not had a chance to do a line by line.
Sure. So does that sound good to the group? Let me just go through it quickly. So Bill commented about the appendix that contributions that essentially he took, I think the main thing was he took some umbrage with the language and kind of the sharpness of it, which I think is a very fair comment to make. And so I went back looking to take the edge off the language and just really deal more factually with the material. And so that is kind of the major what has happened in that. There was also some comments, not by Bill, but kind of by the subcommittee in general, about is this relevant? Is the Appendix D relevant? And what is the relevance when we're talking about landfill capacity? And so one of the changes is just to pretty much codify what we talked about, why Appendix D is relevant, and to put that into a summary and language at the beginning. So Chuck, I see your hand is up. Do you want to comment? You're muted.
I'm sorry, are we referring to Exhibit D that Daniel sent out? And is that the one you're referring to? I just want to make sure I'm on the right Appendix D that you're talking about. Right.
No, I'm referring to the rewrite is in the document which I sent out about an hour before this meeting.
Oh, wow.
As a separate document.
Oh, I haven't any time to review that. Okay. All right. Okay. I'll see if I can open it up. I just didn't know if you're referring to the one that Daniel had in his, or just the new one then, huh?
Yeah, this is a new one. So in the document which I sent out, the text which has changed is in blue. So you can see kind of what's happened, in the text which is in black is basically the same as what has been in earlier versions. So
and you want to share your screen maybe so people can reference that just in case they don't have it up on their own computer?
Yeah, sure. So Daniel, if you can kind of walk, am I authorized to share my screen? Can I?
There should be a green button at the bottom of your view.
Yeah.
Do you see that?
I do.
Let me know if it doesn't let you share.
I think last time I did this, I clicked the wrong button.
I can share that PDF version if you need me to, Ken.
Okay.
All right.
Can we see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. It's a little weird. I guess I can't see what you're seeing. Can we read that?
You could zoom in a little bit for me, or I could just put my nose next to the screen.
I feel your pain, Mark. Yeah, there you go.
That's better. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, sure. Okay, so So there you can see the summary which has been added. So that is essentially the reason why this appendix exists, why it's part of this document. So the first little part up here is just referring back to the 2 columns up in the table up above, which have little notes that say, for more information, you can go to Appendix D. And then there's in the summary, there's just an explanation about the connection between landfills and methane and why that has a potential, efforts to reduce methane can also be, can also act to essentially reduce the amount that goes into a landfill, because organic material will be, looked at as something which is possible to divert. So I think the most contentious bit, which is in this rewrite, has to do with the second paragraph here in relevance to Coffin Butte landfill and its longevity. And this is because this is a paragraph that Daniel and I had been working on. And so this paragraph is connected to Bill, especially called out, he wanted the waste to energy plant at Coffin Butte landfill was indeed referenced in this document before, but it wasn't really called out for kind of what it is, which is indeed, a facility which is dedicated to capturing fugitive methane so that it doesn't do climate damage and instead goes to a waste to energy plant. And so this is called out specifically, kind of as Bill requested in this particular paragraph. And so Daniel, you had wanted, feel free to kind of jump in, but you had wanted to put in a figure having to do with how much of a percentage of the total greenhouse gas emissions we're talking about here. And so I've included that as this right here, waste disposal comprises a small percentage of Oregon's total greenhouse gas emissions. So that's kind of what's happened to that. You had referenced a study done, having to do with sector based inventory versus consumption based inventory of landfill emissions, and that there were problems essentially with that reference. So it seemed to me that what you wanted to communicate was essentially that we're talking about a relatively small amount of the total emissions. But the thing that I wanted to make clear is that I didn't want to have an apples and oranges situation, because when you're talking about total greenhouse gas emissions, you're talking mostly about carbon dioxide, whereas we're talking about methane, and of course I'm not sure exactly what the point is, because a small percentage of a huge number is still a large number, so still something worth worrying about. So and the information, the data you were looking at was fairly old. It's 8 years old. So and there are other problems with it as well, which I don't know that we want to get into because we have a big agenda to go through. So I think the question really comes to you, Daniel, if this really does indeed address your concerns. You wanted to give context, and I'm wondering if this actually gives the context that you wanted.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I think so. I think you did a pretty good job trying to capture that and just add that to the conversation of what waste means to climate change, which is I think what I was hoping to get at. The only change I would make is saying roughly 1 to 3% if we throw in a percentage, and then I would just be careful about how you discuss low-hanging fruit with regards to methane. Low-hanging fruit usually means big rewards for very small effort, and I'm not sure if that captures what methane capture is at landfills, and I would put that back over to Republic because I'm not an expert in fugitive methane emissions from landfills. But I think the idea of calling something out as low hanging fruit might be tricky and sort of a judgment call there. But
Do
yeah,
you
I think generally that captures what I was hoping to capture here. Thanks for adding that.
Okay, sure. Do you have a quick replacement for low hanging fruit? No, I know. No, okay.
No,
Don't at
sorry.
this point,
The
Tim.
only thing I could think of is not having that sentence. But that, I don't know. We've had so little time to review this information. I haven't had a chance.
Okay. Okay, good. So there's a question mark on that. What if we just replace it with is an opportunity? I see
That
Ginger
makes sense
nodding.
to me.
So we're not characterizing that opportunity, but we are noting that it exists. Okay, that sounds great. So this will go back to, I propose that this go on to Republic, to Ginger for a final review. I think we're pretty much in agreement. I guess the last thing that I'll just address is just that, you know, in our last meeting, Bill said he did not want to see any mention of anything specific to Coffin Butte in this. And when I was reviewing it, I couldn't do that, you know, because otherwise it now seems to be just something which is talking about landfills in general. And I mean, obviously this document is about a particular landfill. So I tried to, you know, backpedal on that language as much as I could, but I couldn't really honor that request. And I would just have to characterize that as not being a request that can be honored. So that's it. Ginger, over to you.
Thanks, Ken. I do have a couple of questions as I was reading this. One is under the relevance to Coffin Butte landfill and its longevity section. Last sentence, this U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimated in 2019. I just saw the XX here, and so I didn't know what the source. I was wondering if you had some of the source data for this, so I can take a look at it. Because I'd like Ian to review it as well for, you know, any context that I need to have for that. I'm just not familiar with where that came from.
Absolutely. So it's footnoted. So footnote 20.
Oh, I'm looking at a version that says XX. Sorry. It might have been an earlier version of this.
No problem. So emission data for the designated pollutants, Oregon amended state plan to implement emissions guidelines for municipal solid waste landfills, ODEQ, August 2019 is the document.
Ian, do you happen to know off the top of your head if that data is still the most recent available, or can you offer any insight into that?
Yeah, I'm not even sure exactly what that document is. I'd have to go back and look. I'm not familiar off the top of my head.
What were you saying, Ken? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. That's I don't have any further information on that either.
Okay. So that was one part where I wanted to do a little bit more sort of ruminating, for lack of a better term. And then there are a couple of places in here, Ken, where you say that methane emissions for Coffin Butte landfill are currently not well characterized, but might become well known. And I just wasn't entirely sure what you were trying to say with currently not well characterized. Are we talking about limited reporting data, or what's the thinking with that phraseology?
Well, you know, this just has a this has to do with the discussions that we've had in committee, and also just kind of with Coffin Butte in general. there isn't good data about what the methane emissions of coffin butte are, or at least I have not run across it. So, if there's good data, about what that is, then I would really love to see it, but that has not come forward. It's an issue which I've really been following. So,
Okay.
so that's kind of where that's coming from. And when I'm looking at how the methane emissions of landfills is characterized, it's just been typically a problem. It's typically been done through mathematical modeling, because you can't really get very good measurements from the landfill itself. And I know in the industry, there's just a lot of discussion about that. But what is happening is that the technology for doing direct measurements, actually seeing the methane coming off a landfill, has kind of become a priority with this emphasis on methane. And so now new methods are coming forward. There's satellite surveillance, there's aerial surveillance, there's tower surveillance, where that data can really be visualized. And so I know a lot of the assumptions in those mathematical models are now being revised, because they now have direct measurement data to kind of compare it to. And so I'm just trying to relay that information, which I've gathered in kind of, that the situation is changing in terms of what we've relied on in the past, and what is likely to be the landscape in the future. And like in the document, I talk about the KROS satellite system that's come online, and they've just released a survey of the 1,000 biggest methane producing facilities in the world. Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, so I guess I was gonna try to help out a little bit in terms of what I understand when you say not well characterized. Typically, if we were trying to characterize something, we would say, at least from my engineering perspective, we would try to better understand how much methane is being generated by the landfill, how much is being captured and beneficially used through the waste to energy plant. I don't know if there's methane emissions from the flare gas. I assume that it's probably not 100% combustion there. And then fugitive emissions. So I think that the characterization, at least as I understand that word, is looking at the big picture and getting a better understanding of the whole methane or gas emission picture. So maybe that helps, Ginger. I don't know.
I was going to ask Ian if there's anything else that we wanted to share, because this is sort of your area of expertise.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I mean, it is characterized per current EPA modeling standards. I mean, so yes, there is emerging technology, but it is also going to have its own limitations. Modeling kind of looks at a big picture long term, whereas say satellites or drones or whatever technology you're looking at are kind of short snapshots of that instant in time. And so a landfill is basically a living organism when you look at it at the large scale. And so it does fluctuate daily, hourly. I mean, there is never going to be a perfect exact model. The other piece I'll add is that a lot of the current models don't really take into consideration communities that have high diversion rates for recycling and composting, which Willamette Valley does have both of those. We have our composting facility that diverts 140 to 160,000 tons of organics every year for composting. And then we have our recycling facility over in Albany, where all of the curbside and commingled recycling goes to be shipped to market. That processes another 20-some thousand tons of recyclable material a year. So those are pieces we want to consider as well as part of the big picture.
Right.
Muting myself. And I think it's sort of the responsibility is on Ian and myself to provide maybe a little bit of context, and maybe you and I can just work offline to try to come to agreement on the language. It sounds like the way you're characterizing it is not incorrect, right? It's hard to define, and there are new technologies, but I think from what Ian is saying, it sounds like we'll just want to add a little context to that, if that is something that you'd be open to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it might be, before Mark jumps in, I just wanted to sort of frame this, make sure that the group feels comfortable with this, because we will not have an opportunity to review this as a group again. This is our last meeting today, so I just wanted to logistically make sure folks understand that, and also figure out a way for the group to weigh in if needed, maybe via email if that's what we're proposing here. And then also just understand a deadline. We need this essentially by like 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, so that we can put this in a report. So I just wanted to map that out before we dive in on next steps. So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I agree with what Ian said. I wouldn't think that anyone would want just a snapshot of what's happening. So it is a sort of a long-term issue to characterize methane emissions, because snapshots don't really count. Also, it's varies seasonally as well as daily. Additional rain, more methane. So yeah, just to support what you said, I don't think anyone's asking for take a drone up there one time and say, okay, this is what it is.
Go for it, Chuck.
Yeah, I just want to agree with Ian. You have to really take a global look at everything that's organic. But one time I read the algorithm that EPA uses, and that algorithm is some pretty deep stuff, that you have to take each cell when it started, how much capacity was in each one, and then it goes through a big long algorithm. So here I think it's just talking generally, but I don't know if it really reflects. I think you can use landfills generally, but just to hone down on comp and view, say it is within some percentages, I think you really have to dwell down at it. And I think it's going to take experts to do that, if you will.
Thanks, Chuck. So we might want to dive into next steps here. So I posed a question earlier if folks feel comfortable approving this offline, maybe via email, and how we get consensus on it offline. Does that mean everyone in the group weighs in and says yes or no via email? How should we do that?
So I can just say, so I have a call that I have to be on at 12:30 your time. Wait, did daylight savings time happen this weekend?
It did.
So what time are you on, Mark?
It's 11 o'clock now.
Okay,
here.
so thank you. So we're on the same time now. I have a call that I have to be on by 1:15-ish. So I can commit to getting specific responses and language to Ken before that call, which would give him a chance to hopefully respond to it. And then Ken, do we want to try to aim to get something out to the group? Like if we agree, maybe by 5 or 6 tonight?
Yes, I think that I think it's likely I'll be able to turn around quicker than that.
Okay. I don't anticipate, just based on what I've read for the group's knowledge, doing significant rewrites. I'm mostly looking at adding information for context here and there. So just, kind of setting the stage. The only thing that I did note is that I know you have it set up as a conclusion. I do feel like the conclusion maybe could be truncated because there seems to be some repetitive stuff in there, like we went through everything in detail. But you're the author, so I'm going to let you decide if you want to add or not. That's not going to be for me
Sure.
today. So
I can look at it with that in mind, because I think you're right.
Okay, so we'll expect to get that kind of final version from Ken and Ginger tonight. I said earlier that we need to get it back to us by first thing tomorrow morning, so we can add that to our draft 5 that goes out to the full work group, which will be an all-day affair tomorrow. So I'll send that out, or Ken and Ginger, you'll send it out to the group, and maybe we can ask for everyone to just respond to all. And I think we'll need some sort of mass of responses being a yes to include it. So yeah, maybe we can emphasize the importance of responding. And thanks for everyone on that.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. So moving on, thanks everyone. So that's Appendix D. We have a little bit more to-dos on that tonight. And thanks for sharing your screen, Ken, since we weren't able to add that to the draft that you're seeing. Okay, so I had a list earlier of to-do items. One of the other ones that I didn't mention is findings and recommendations, obviously really important part. So do folks want to jump over to findings and recommendations, or definitions and common terms, or any other areas of the document that you are concerned about?
Findings and recommendations for me.
All right.
I think that's where we need to go.
Okay. So I will navigate there unless there's any other concern on that from the group. Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and share my screen. I tried to consolidate some of the comments just in preparation for today's meeting. So you have all the comments on the version you're looking at, but I tried to simplify some of them ahead of today. So I think in order to get through this, because we basically have proposed changes for most of the most of the findings and recommendations, I think we might want to consider something like kind of bulk proposals of, I propose, accepting all of the changes as they're written with the exception of XYZ, something like that to help us get through it. But I will let the group navigate to the findings and recommendations that they're particularly concerned about if there's any anybody in the group has anything they'd like to focus on. Ginger, I know you submitted a bunch of comments here that I've added, as well as some written additions here as well. If you want to dive into any of them, otherwise I'll also entertain the idea of just accepting.
yeah, I mean, I don't know how the subcommittee wants to handle this. I mean, I did, Ken and I talked offline a little bit last week, and I did basically go line by line from start to end through this document to try to get a sense of where we were as a group. And so there are some questions on specific findings, but there are also significant redundancies throughout this document that I think makes it very difficult to read. I am open to the other subcommittee members' suggestions on how we go through this. Ken, I know you had some concerns about redundancies and repetitive sections in here, and also about the way the executive summary was currently listed. I think Mark had some concerns about the placement of the executive summary and the grouping of the findings and recommendations. Beyond me going through and making every single comment that I made, I don't know that I have a great suggestion on how to proceed from this point.
Thanks, Ginger. Ken.
Yeah, so I just want to go through a few of Ginger's recommendations. So right now what we're looking at, there's a recommendation from Ginger that starts saying, I would combine 1 and 2 for clarity. Well, let's see. There was a recommendation. I think actually I'm thinking of something else. There was a recommendation where you said to eliminate 1 because it seems to be duplicated in the one like 2 rows down. So I think that's down a little ways.
Yeah, I think,
I think it's
this
right
one right
there.
here. I think it's this FX, which you added, and
Yes. So anyway, I that is a redundancy which I think we should take. So I think we should just do what you said, eliminate that first one in favor of the third one.
so do you want to keep this one that's hot, Daniel's highlighted then, and remove the other one, or do you want to remove this one and keep the, that's what I want to make sure. It doesn't matter to me.
You suggest removing the first one, the one that's
Yeah.
highlighted now, and I agree with that.
Okay, okay.
So we can just remove that one.
All right, any other concerns before I delete this? Okay, hearing none. All right, go for it.
And then if we scroll down a little bit farther, there are a number that Ginger says to remove. And so, well, before I get to that, the one above that, proposed alternate language here to reflect our approach later in this document, accept that. So that's good.
All right, any other thoughts for accepting
Yeah.
the changes?
Oh,
Sorry, Ken, I just wanted to put it to the group.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, hearing none other. All right, go for it, Ken. And I'll add all the table XXX spots. I'll clean that up at the end if the group is comfortable with me doing that. All right,
Okay.
go for it,
Right.
Ken.
Yeah, so Ginger has a number of, she wants to remove the findings, those 3, I think. And I'm good with that. I just have some alternate language essentially to replace them, which I will put right now in the chat. And that just has to do with what we have just recently been talking about. So I just agree with Ginger's points. I think these are just too disconnected from what was I thinking? That's the short form of what I'm saying here.
I'm okay with what Ken put in the chat, as long as Ian doesn't see anything that leaps out at him. I think I may still have a little tweak here and there on the well characterized, but I think you make the point very clearly through mathematical modeling, because the emissions themselves were hard to measure directly, and I think that kind of gets at what we're trying to state. So I'm okay with the substitute language.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, any other concerns? So the proposal is to delete the 3 in red and keep the one that Ken just added here. Any other concerns with that? All right, hearing none, I'll go ahead and do that. All right, take it away, Ken.
And I think that's it. I think.
Okay,
Well, let's see, Ginger also.
Yeah, Ken, I was
Oh.
gonna say on this one, with the 2019 reference, I'm happy to put that back in. I just want Ian to check if there's any more recent data, if he can make a check on that. If not, it's now that we've talked about it in the subcommittee meeting, I'm fine with that language.
Absolutely. So that's all I was going to say about that, is if it is indeed good data, then let's put it back in.
Yeah.
And I'm done.
so
Okay.
I'm just reading it now, and it appears to be a generic state plan that wasn't site specific. So it was an overall DEQ state plan that they put together. So I don't know that we would want to attribute specifically to one site when it's kind of an overall document that the DEQ put together for the entire state, I guess, would be my comment.
Well, the document does include the data which I'm referencing, in a table.
I'll have to get into it in a little more depth then.
Okay, cool.
So I think for the sake of the group for offline work, if we can flag it to come back to on our call today, but I'm going to ask that we don't do anything else offline besides Appendix D. So maybe we can just flag that and come back to it if Ian has an opportunity to review it during our call. But I just don't want to keep adding to the offline because I think it'll be pretty complicated here. So in the meantime, are we just thinking highlighting this and come back?
Yeah, just highlight it with a note. I mean, certainly Ken and I and Mark and we'll all remember that we need to come back for it. I think
Okay.
we're pretty good about keeping track of our hanging pads, so to speak.
All right. Excellent. Sounds good. Well, I guess I'll entertain any other ideas for changes for findings or comments.
If you don't mind, just a quick explainer on F8. Paul and I kind of wrote the original one on the fly, and we were trying to like combine a bunch of different ideas, and then we didn't really have a chance to be very thoughtful about it. So this is sort of me actually going back and saying that previous finding was a little bit confusing and making an attempt to rewrite it. The question I had is, as you can see, one of these findings deals with primarily the quarry area and what is permitted airspace and how does that work. The second is more of an explainer between Benton County's role and DEQ's role. And I don't know if that should be its own finding or if that should just be in definitions or if we still need that. There seemed to have been some confusion initially about what Benton County does in terms of determining the landfill's permitted airspace versus what DEQ and Republic Services or Valley Landfills Inc. does. So I would pose that question to the group, whether everybody wants to see that in one, whether we think we can eliminate one, whether one needs to move to definitions and explanations, etc. If anybody has any thoughts on that.
I'm comfortable with that showing up as is in the finding. I don't have any particular impression that it should be in a certain spot. So I'm okay with it as is unless anybody else has concerns. And Ginger, if you're proposing to move it, I think that'd be fine too.
No, I think it could stay the way it is if nobody else seems to have any concerns about it. That's fine.
Okay. Excellent.
I think 9, Ian had some concerns about how this was written. And so can you kind of talk the group through that, please?
Yeah, I'm trying to reread it. I don't have my comments in front of me for what we put on that one.
You said, ultimately, based on what the legal subcommittee puts together, this sentence needs to be removed. The way it's currently written makes it sound like cell 6 was the last edition.
Oh, yeah, because the last edition were those east and west triangles. So this one's just confusing the way it's written.
Is it that cell 6 are you saying it's because cell 6 hasn't formally been like added as a site to be filled, or
no, it was added. I mean, it was added way back from the beginning. So this one is just confusing because it makes it sound like it was after the east and west triangles.
Oh, I get what you mean. Mainly because we don't have this TBD filled out. Is that if the TBD said 1983, you would be comfortable with this?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, we're kind of putting it in, it seems like it's supposed to be in chronological order, and the way it's written currently, we talk about the east and west triangles and then cell 6. And So those east and west triangles brought the total up to the 38 point something million. I'm not quite sure when the 35.5 million was, because I only have the annual reports, and those show a different number back into the early 2000s.
Okay, well, I'm happy to rework this if there's any suggestions on how to change it. I think the TBD is because the county is still trying to determine, and I'm not sure if the legal subcommittee has come to a conclusion on that yet, but when and if cell 6 was added or from the county's approval process. But yeah, is there any thoughts? Yeah, Mark.
Yeah, I just want to say that, the cell 6 thing is a little bit complicated because in 1994, when the expansion request was put forward and then not approved, cell 6 was actually on the other side of the road, was on the south side of the road. Cell 6, 7, and 8 were over there. And so I don't know, in the review of the land use records that we have done as part of the land use subcommittee, I don't ever recall seeing a specific date at which cell 6 was added. So, if the county can find a date, that would be great. And then maybe it would be reorder it so that it deals with Ian's concerns about the chronological order of this.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah, the county staff are diving into this. We're not going to have it done before this draft goes to the work group, almost certainly. So if we can reword this to, basically capture that uncertainty, I think that would be most appropriate, because this isn't going to be resolved, I don't think, unless, I know Ian mentioned the legal subcommittee having something, but I don't think that's been resolved yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the legal subcommittee would have to do with this, but that's beside the point. It might be that you just reword it and say the addition of cell 6 added approximately 13,400 or 13,400,000 cubic yards, and then have that as the first sentence, and then put in the go landfill total capacity increased by blah 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 in 2003, and then a total capacity of 35.5, if that's the right number. Sounds like Ian says there's a different number. But if you reorder it, then we don't really have to worry about when cell 6 was added. Potentially, that's a way to move it around a little bit.
Thanks,
Yeah, I
Mark.
think that reordering makes sense, Mark.
I would agree.
Excellent. All right.
So then I think you can just get rid of the TBD, because if we're not going to have it at some point, if it comes up and if it becomes important or significant, then we can go back to it. But at this point,
We have a recommendation, I believe, that covers that too, saying the county should
figure
look
it out.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Does that work for the group? The only other question I have is, can we delete this review accuracy based on Bill's feedback at this point? And I think that was something Ginger and Ian might be able to speak to.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, Bill had a disconnect on what the east and west was referring to. So I think this clarifies that. Ian, am I right there?
Yeah, I think so. That there was the one meeting that could come up.
Okay. So I will delete this. And are there any other concerns with finding 9? All right, excellent. What about other findings? I think I'm getting to the point where I'm going to ask, should we move on with the findings as drafted? So if there's any other places to draw our attention to, now's the time.
Daniel, I think finding 11, I asked a question and Ian said that it is correct. So you can, I think we can just remove this.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
I would
I
just
know.
say, oh, go ahead,
Go
Mark.
ahead. No, go ahead, Ginger.
I was just gonna say, instead of by 2013, you might just say in 2013. Because the by makes it sound like it's growing, but there was actually a drop off from what I gathered from all of the chatter back and forth, so.
That makes
That's
sense.
That's
Any
fine. Yep.
any
No, that's
concerns
fine.
with that change?
No, that's fine.
Okay, go for it, Mark.
So I was just gonna say, I don't have the luxury of two screens. I'm working off a laptop, so I
Mm.
can't look at my comments and look at this at the same time. So as we're working our way through this, if we're, I'm gonna look at my comments because I put some comments in over the weekend. And so I'm gonna go to those, but if people are bringing things up, if you could refer to which specific finding or recommendation we're talking about, that would help me track on my document.
Sounds
Mark,
great.
are you-
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, are your comments reflected in what we're looking at on this screen?
I'm sorry, Ginger, what was that?
Your comments reflected in what we're looking at on the screen, or are they not part of this presentation?
They are not part of this presentation. They're things that that over the weekend, as I was reading this next close final draft, I added some more comments, and I just want to make sure that I bring them up if they're appropriate.
Okay, I was confused because I didn't see anything that had your name on it, and I thought maybe I had looked at an old draft or something, so.
No,
okay.
some of my comments are here, but they were older comments. I have newer ones, I think, and that's why I'm going to go to my document on my computer and just see if I can track along here and see if I've had anything more.
Sounds great. And I'll be clear on which ones we're working on.
Yeah, and I'll work my way down my side here and see if there's anything that jumps out at me.
Okay.
Yeah,
So oh, go for it.
I was just going to say the next place where I have a comment is on F15. This is not significant, but I didn't understand why we were talking about Washington County tonnage. I mean, we're talking about Riverbend, and Riverbend had Washington County, but it also had Yamhill and a whole bunch of, I didn't understand why this particular finding only calls out Washington County's tonnage. It's not significant. We don't need to spend any time. If the numbers are right, that's fine. It was just seemed odd to me.
I don't know why either. I thought somebody else had put that in there.
At some point, somebody called out and said that Washington County was up and wanted something related to it. I don't know why it's in there either. It could probably be deleted.
No, it's fine the way it is. It just seems like because Riverbend was in fact the recipient of waste from many counties, I didn't, and maybe this is an effort to point to how much was coming out of the Portland area. I don't know.
Mark, I think I'm not sure who added this, but I think the idea is because Washington County had the most substantial increase from 2017 timeline
on the
in Benton
graph.
County's waste. Yeah, in the graph, I think the idea is that it's connecting the dots, saying, hey, Washington County sent waste to Riverbend, and then when Riverbend closed, Benton County received a lot of waste, the majority of it coming from Washington County, not the majority of waste, but the biggest increase coming from Washington County. I think the idea is that it's connecting the dots there.
Okay.
I see
Thank
Ken's hand. Go for it.
Yeah, I have a question about that last sentence. You know, it's in the passive voice. Tonnage from Riverbend was diverted to Coffin Butte. How would that sentence read if it were in active voice? Who is diverting tonnage from Riverbend in an effort to extend Riverbend's site life?
Ian, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe the owner operator of Riverbend
Yeah, that's correct.
reached out to us and
Waste
asked if
management.
we would take some of the waste because they were trying to extend the life of that landfill while they worked to achieve a successful CUP, which they were not able to do.
Okay, great. If we could just put that in, because otherwise it's just, I think that it's important to know exactly who's doing the, you know, who's doing that effort.
So does Riverbend diverted tonnage to Coffin Butte in an effort to extend Riverbend's site life? Does that?
I would just say
Capture it.
Riverbend's owner/operator. diverted tonnage to Coffin Butte in an effort to extend the landfill site life.
It might be
let's
worth
keep
saying
it-
River Bend in
Yeah.
there just so that it doesn't miscommunicate that it might be an effort to extend Coffin Butte's life.
Got it.
Anyway, that's good. That's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, any other concerns with this? Excellent. Mark, did you have any other thoughts that you've captured?
Yeah, I'm working my way through. So if we can go to F22. Minor editing, but in the on the second line where it refers to a successful application, I'd prefer that to say upon a governmental approval of an application to expand.
That's fine.
Not a significant change, but a little tweaking of the tone there.
Upon a governmental application, upon a
So-
governmental approval of an application.
Right.
Okay.
Or you don't have to have you can just upon governmental approval of an application. You can get rid of the
All right. Any concerns with that? Excellent. Take it away, Mark.
Going to my next one. Let's see, this is down at F33. Ginger had a comment here that said Republic Services would like to add the language in red. And when I was looking here, I didn't know what that was.
Yeah. So I deleted that comment, or I resolved that comment here mainly because I think that was before Ginger Paul had like looked at all of the findings, recommendations, and consolidated them. So I think that red text was lost, and it's sort of an outdated comment. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, so it doesn't matter anymore. It's not there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of the
okay.
comments were it would say things like delete this one, keep the one above, but it was like old. It was from early February before when there was
Sure.
an item above. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The next place, if you want me to just keep rolling, I don't know if I can't
Please.
see if anyone else has their hands up or anything. So the next place I have I'd like to have a little discussion is under F36. This is the one that says landfill has changed visually over time. And so my comment from yesterday looks like sort of losing track here about footprint versus height and visual appearance. Let me look at some of these other comments that were here. So Ginger in the comment above that says, are we trying to say it's grown or gotten taller? Republic Services is okay with such phrasing, made an attempt to address. I so many versions of this thing. I don't know what we're doing here. I do think that the issue is, or the point that was being made here, and this sort of ties back to the land use subcommittee's work on reclamation and what ultimately the landfill is going to be looking like once it's closed. The last sentence, which talks about, however, the overall landfill acreage, most notably permitted airspace. The sentence just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Acreage and airspace, as we've discussed multiple times, I mean, there's a footprint, but that's not necessarily related to airspace. It is kind of. So having said that, and not having a specific recommendation for you at the moment, let me ponder this and I'll see if I can give some feedback. But the visual aspects of the landfill have to do with its appearance, that now it's a very tall facility that's mostly covered with plastic tarps. So it has in fact grown in size in terms of acreage or footprint, and also grown in height, but it also now has a visual aspect to it that it is a very tall facility with plastic tarps on it.
Thanks,
All right.
Mark.
Yeah.
I had one thought. I didn't catch that issue with acreage and permitted airspace in my first read. And I think maybe deleting most notably permitted airspace here might be a good opportunity because, you know, we have shown that landfill, like the landfill acreage change, specifically the the ownership of that like acreage of landfill space hasn't changed, and we showed that, but the permitted airspace, we have just gone over findings that show millions of yards of change in airspace. So I think deleting that would go a long way to clarifying what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and so as we're thinking out loud here, I think what we can do in the first sentence at the end, where it says a landfill has changed visually since its designation as a regional landfill in 1974, growing in both height and size, comma, and visual appearance would deal with what I'm trying to get at in terms of how it looks to the public.
Yeah,
Okay.
has it changed or has it developed over time since it is developed to a design, not changed?
Yeah, Chuck, that's a good point because the overall, that whatever it was, 194 acres that was changed in that 1983 zoning, that hasn't changed. I think that's what we were trying to capture, is that amount, that acreage that was approved for it hasn't really changed, but and that's a good word for it, we've developed the landfill on that existing acreage over time.
So where would you put that language, Ian or Chuck?
The landfill has changed, but it's more or less as developed visually over time by design.
Does that work for the group? This first sentence changing, the landfill has developed visually over time by design.
I like it, but
Yeah, I'm stumbling a little on the word by design. How about in accordance with the site development plans?
Does that work for Republic folks and Chuck?
I'm going to
Yeah, that's-
defer to Ian. So if Ian's comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it.
yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, it's basically saying the same thing.
It is, but it's it has, I think it has a different connotation.
Probably more clear too.
Yeah.
Any other concerns or thoughts for finding 36? I did propose deleting most notably permitted airspace. Is that okay with the group?
It is by me.
Yeah, I think so. It's a little confusing having that in there.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Let me try to catch up here and then I'll keep going if anyone else has comments.
All right. So hearing none for that, I'm going to move on. I think this might be a good time to ask the group, are we comfortable with where findings and recommendations are with the pending track changes that were added to the versions that you're looking at? Based on the discussion we've already had, can we approve the changes for findings just for the findings?
Was that it on the findings? Yeah. It looks
Yep,
like on
that
the
was it.
recommendations. Yeah, I'm fine with it.
All right. Anybody else have thoughts before we approve these changes? I'm going to highlight them all and just approve the changes if I don't hear any other concerns. Okay, hearing none, I'll go ahead and approve those changes if it lets me. Okay, excellent. Thanks, everyone. That's big progress. So let's move on to recommendations. Is there any notes that folks want to add or change about the proposed changes here?
I'm looking at recommendation 4. the language that was added about discussions being proprietary or attorney-client privilege. I'm wondering if we can clarify that there was no public involvement at all in this negotiation process or in the review process of the draft. I shouldn't say not at all. There was one public hearing right before, it was on December 15th of 2020. And there was no other public outreach or involvement at all. So this last sentence, it would be great if we could say that these negotiations were conducted in private, and there are elements of these discussions that may be proprietary and or fall under attorney-client privilege. I have to go back to see what you're changing there, Daniel, and see if any flipping back between screens.
So Mark, it reads now, these negotiations were
I got
conducted
it.
privately. You see it?
Yeah, I see it. I switched over. Thanks, Ginger.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I can go back and forth, but it's doing both at the same time. If I had
Oh.
two screens, if only I only had two screens, I could watch two things at once.
We can all chip in for a birthday present.
So any thoughts on this one as it's changed?
I'm fine with it.
I'm confused by these negotiations were conducted privately. If Benton County was there as a public agency, then they are somewhat quasi-public, are they not? I'm not sure what you're inferring there.
Well, I'm inferring that these negotiations took place in, if you will, private meetings, and because that's what happened. There's been a public records request to get access to the emails that went back and forth between the county council, who was negotiating the agreements, and the county commissioners, and those records have been being withheld at the moment. And there was no public involvement in review of the draft agreement before it was adopted by the county commissioners. So they in fact were conducted privately. There were meetings that took place in rooms where no one was involved except for the county council and I assume Republic's attorneys.
So I just added in parentheses, not in public meetings, to make that
That's-
clarification.
Sure, that's great.
Any other concerns with this one before we move on? All right, hearing none. Are there any other thoughts for recommendations?
I am trying to catch up here. Which one does this go to? Oh. So for R6, which is Ginger has a comment, says that this R6 needs to be stricken or updated based on the latest discussions. What are we doing with this one?
So to my point earlier, I don't think that this has been resolved. So I would say we should probably leave it in. I mean, I don't think it hurts to leave it in, since we don't have the answer to it yet. But if I'm open to more clarification here.
Ginger, thoughts there?
I mean, I'm fine with leaving it in right now because I don't know where those discussions were either. I'm not part of them. I only hear about things after the fact in that regard. So, you know, if something, you know, comes out that changes it, then we'll change it. But that's why I said, you know, based on latest discussions, if they're not finalized, then let's just leave it where it is.
Okay.
Come back.
That's to do with the land action, if I remember correctly only, right?
The question is, when the county's required approval process took place for the space designated as cell 6 on Republic Site Development Plan. All right. Anything else, Mark? Do you have anything for finding, or sorry, for recommendations?
I got a couple other things, but not important to talk about. I think Ginger has several comments here about things that she wants to have deleted. So I think we should probably go to those.
So Ginger, we had a couple from a couple comments here in these last 5, starting at number 8.
Yeah, can you go back up for 1 second, Daniel?
Yes.
Just, I think we may have skipped over one. Go back above the attorney-client privilege. We didn't really. What does comment above that Bill and I commented on?
Yeah, it's R3.
Yeah, R3. We didn't discuss this. But
Okay.
I mean, I'm not sure what else to say here, other than we don't support the finding. I mean, we're basically making a recommendation that, Benton County conduct an updated study. And I think the issue that I really have with it is this last sentence. The county should use this information to inform decision-making and financial choices regarding income from the landfill. I'm just uncomfortable as a franchisee with a contractual relationship with Benton County, supporting a recommendation that tells the county what to do to inform decision-making and financial choices regarding the contract they already have with us. It just puts Republic Services in this kind of weird, awkward space. And so, I don't really know how to resolve this, to be quite honest. It's just something that's it's an uncomfortable recommendation for us as a company and as a business doing business with the county to support.
Yeah. Thanks, Ginger. So I guess the question I have, just to move the discussion along, is does adding some language like that, adding your language, Republic Services does not support this finding as written in there, does that do the trick? Or is this something that we have to work with the group on whether or not to keep it in the document?
Well, I guess I would pose the question. I know Mark has a comment, so just get to him right after me. But I guess I would pose the question to Sam as the facilitator, asking, does it make sense? If the subcommittee wants it in there, do we leave it in there, and then Republic Services votes, polls against it, as a 2 or a 3, and then we write a memo explaining our position? Or what's, as we get to the polling process, what's the best approach for us to take?
Well, I mean, it is a political / tactical call on your part as to how you want to frame this up. We have not, at the subcommittee level, gotten to a place yet where we've said, let's poll the subcommittee. Thinking out loud, subject to input from everyone, it seems like, I think it would be of service to the full work group to say, here are the people that support this, here are the people that do not support it, and then the work group has more information to decide, is it groovy or not groovy with that particular language.
Mark, what's your thought?
Yeah, so I was just going to say that I read this differently than you might be reading it, Ginger, in that I don't think this is intended for Republic Services to be telling the county what to do with their money. The idea, I think, and I didn't write this, I didn't have any involvement in it. I read it over this morning and I saw your comment, but The idea was that back in the 2000 franchise agreement, there was the threshold number that basically gave the county the opportunity to do its own independent baseline study about the impacts of the landfill on all these areas. So Bill commented and said, we already do all this, but that's Republic's view of those sorts of things. It's not an independent study. And I think the purpose of this last sentence is to say to the county that that baseline study that the county would conduct would help them to understand, number one, how to use the money from the landfill, because they may want to spend it on road improvements or other sorts of things. So I didn't read it. I see how you're concerned about it, but I didn't read it in the same way that you did. It wasn't Republic Services telling the county how to make their decisions or how to use their money. It was a county conducting its own baseline study to assess the impacts of the landfill.
Thanks, Mark. We have Chuck's hand, and then let's try to move on. Go
Would
for it,
not,
Chuck.
is it not that this baseline study will be part of the professional part when the county, according to their letter of January 13th, assembles the professional team? Would that be a better way to slant it, in the sense that the baseline should be included with that to give context to it?
You mean, Chuck, do you think it's going to be part of the SMMP?
Well, yes, it could be.
But I don't think it is as it's structured now, not in the same way.
Well, what I'm saying is in the essence, with the professionals coming on board, it not only is with the SMP, but there's other call outs for their charges there. Could that not be included in it if we direct it that in that direction? Just curious.
I think as written, it might apply to a sort of broad range of decision making. So in my understanding, it could apply to what you're talking about, Chuck.
Okay, thank you.
So Sam, you started.
So Ginger, is it the whole the whole recommendation, or is it just the last sentence? Well, the last two sentences. I mean, I understand what the last sentence is a conclusion, but the sentence that reads the county should then use. Is that what you're objecting to? Or
Yeah.
are you objecting to the whole thing? Go ahead.
I think Bill was thinking the whole thing based on the fact that we already do all of this because it's part of our requirement when we do a land use application and then the DEQ permit submittal. I do understand Mark's point about, well, that's fine. That's what Republic Services is doing. You know, that's the information Republic Services is submitting. And, you know, we're talking about an independent third party. So, you know, I could be more comfortable with the top part of the language if we're saying that, you know, Benton County, you know, should hire an independent third party, you know, something of that in that vein. I'm just still really tripping up with, I think, the vagueness of this last sentence. The county should then use this information to inform decision-making and financial choices regarding income from the landfill franchise. I just don't know enough about like what the franchise agreement says that the money could be used for. I'm not sure what informed decision-making is supposed to be. And it really just sounds like Republic Services is putting itself in a position to like be renegotiating the franchise agreement with the county based on a new baseline study. And I'm just a little confused as to where all of this is potentially headed. And
so I'm just making a proposal to see if this would work. The Benton County should contract for an updated baseline study. And well, let him finish that. And then I would remove the county should use this information. I mean, let's first start, if those last two sentences then were removed, could Republic live with that statement?
Maybe. And what do you
Okay.
think?
Yeah, I would say maybe as well, because we're not interested in renegotiating a franchise based off of something.
Yeah, and the current franchise agreement doesn't stipulate for that, doesn't say anything about that. So I'm wondering if an alternative to the second to last sentence might be this baseline study could help inform the county in its decision-making and financial choices regarding income from the landfill. It doesn't say anything about renegotiations or anything. So the baseline study could help inform Benton County or the county's decision-making and financial choices regarding income from the landfill. You could take the word franchise out even.
I'm getting closer to being okay with this. I'll just be real blunt, Mark. I will have to run this by some folks on my end. But this is closer to where I want to be. So
yeah, the idea is it's the study to help the county with its decision making. It's not Republic saying what to do, and the fact that it's now said, we should contract for it. It could be third-party independent study, baseline study, whatever. But I think that's the intent.
Okay.
But it's not just to limit income. I mean, to make choices regarding income.
No, decision-making and financial choices regarding income. So help inform.
I mean, if you guys can live with it, I'm fine.
What are you suggesting, Sam? What do you think should be there?
Well, this is general revenue income, right? I mean, just from a governance perspective, this is going into the general fund.
Sure.
And so the baseline study can help inform Benton County decision-making, period. I mean, that's all you need. And that may make it more acceptable. Not that pure acceptability is the only goal, but it's once you start saying financial choices regarding the income, you're implying that the county should maybe not use it for the general fund. It should be, specific to improving the roads around the landfill or whatever.
Well, and I think that's part of the intent. Again, I don't know who wrote this to start with, but I think part of the intent was to highlight the fact that the revenues from the landfill, without getting into too much detail, they are in fact unrestricted revenues, and the county can use them in any way they want. But having a baseline study that identifies impacts and costs associated with having the landfill would help inform the county with regard to decision-making related to the landfill and the financial revenues that come from the landfill. I think that's what its intent was.
Okay, so I would put in regarding how to use income from the landfill. I mean,
Sure,
that
that's
makes
fine.
it clear
Yeah.
regarding how to use the income.
So just a process piece, Ginger said she would need to check in with her team. This would create another sort of offline decision here. I'm trying not to make this as.
You don't need to. Checking in with my team just means we're either going to agree with it or we're not. And I'm going to run the language. I'm not proposing any additional changes at this point. Like I'm just trying to, I don't want to blindside everybody if we get to polling and we come back with not a 1 on this. I'm telling you, I can't guarantee that will support this, but I am much more comfortable with the way it is written now, me personally. I am
Okay.
not a voting member of the work group, unless my boss is not there. So that's my caveat that I'm putting on the discussion.
Got it. Thanks, Ginger. All right, so quick time check. We have 4 minutes of the scheduled meeting left. We obviously haven't touched a lot of kind of pending pieces of the report. So I wanted to check in with the group. What's your time frame look like? Are you interested in staying longer today? Or should we go ahead and try to figure out how to treat all the unreviewed pieces of this report? So I guess a thumbs up if you're hoping or interested in staying longer to review in more detail, or we can go in and try to, okay, I'm seeing a couple thumbs up.
And some of the things that we have to go through on the recommendations involve yours. Can you give it another 15 minutes or so?
Sorry, Ginger, who was that directed to? Ken?
It was Ken.
Okay.
Yeah, I can stay another 15 minutes.
Okay, let's do it. So let's spend hopefully just a little bit of time on the recommendations, and then let's try to get to the rest of the report here. So where do you want to direct our attention to, Ken or Ginger?
If you scroll down, I think there's just a few comments in here. Most of these are, I'm not actually striking them or anything like that. I think we can go through them pretty quickly, but Ken wrote all these, so that's why I wanted him on the call. This is for the group for finding R8. I know there is a lot of interest in getting tonnage figures from the previous year for presentation to SWAC and DSAC as soon as they are available, and not wait to include them in the annual report. I not make the commitment to do that on behalf of the company for the business unit. They have their own schedule and verification process or whatever. So I'm just flagging that. I mean, if the group wants to put it in as a recommendation, that's fine. I just don't know that it would realistically be something that we could do.
Ginger, this might be more of a county thing, just relaying the information you provide to the county to help determine the fees. I'm pretty sure that's submitted to the county relatively quickly by quarter. So it might be more of a county thing to say, hey, here's the information we've received from our public so far.
Okay, and that's fine. I wanted to flag it because I just don't know that our reporting schedule would change based on a recommendation from the committee.
And I was just going to say, I think it could probably be labeled as preliminary data, but that data is available right away at the end of the quarter, or relatively quickly after the end of the quarter. So it could be shared with SWAC or DSAC and couched as preliminary data.
So the suggestion to add preliminary annual tonnage figures, is that?
Not necessary from my perspective, but if it
Okay.
makes Ginger or her team more comfortable, that's, I was just suggesting that way as a qualifier for the data.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to add. I just don't, if it's something that we want to recommend that the county try to reach out to Republic Services and get it earlier, that's fine. The group can keep that recommendation. I'm just not sure that that's a realistic thing.
Okay. Thanks, Ginger. And you had some comments on the red.
Yes,
items
so
as well.
I'm going to come back to this one that's essentially number 9, but I would like go down to this one on the bottom of the screen. Benton County should keep in mind that the most effective way to curtail landfills. I think this is a good finding. I think Ken added this, and it may have been rewritten at some point to really get at the greenhouse gas, methane, food waste, connection. So my recommendation would be that the group support this finding as written.
Okay.
And then with these other 3, seem to be more statements as opposed to what we're recommending, except for the second one here. Benton County should take steps to have the methane emissions of Coffin Butte landfill measured using new technologies that are coming or have become available. I don't think it's Benton County's, I may be saying this wrong, place or responsibility or purview to measure methane emissions from Coffin Butte. Ian, I know you've talked about, you know more about methane than I do, but I know we're in compliance with EQ requirements or EPA requirements, right? So that this second finding was the one that really kind of gave me some pause, just in terms of making a recommendation that Benton County add either another layer of methane emission measuring, or be part of a process of which they currently do not have jurisdiction. And if I'm saying this all incorrectly, forgive me, but.
No, that's correct, Ginger. And I would just add, like I did earlier, that some of these emerging technologies are just snapshots and not really necessarily that big picture. So.
Okay, any thoughts from the group? Ginger's concerned about the sort of jurisdictional boundaries that this finding or this recommendation has. And Ken, go for it.
Yeah, so when I wrote this, I'm just talking about the actual knowledge about, there's a certain amount of knowledge, right, that seems to be within the jurisdictional purview, knowledge about, ways in which you acquire knowledge, that you can then act on. But I think that it's just important for Benton County to not, I think that as a resident of Benton County, I think it's important to actually know, to kind of get ahead of the game, if you will, and not move at the speed of legislation, which is kind of slow. So that's the intention behind this, so I'm not sure exactly where the jurisdictional part applies, just in terms of acquiring knowledge using the new methods which are available. And I understand certainly the snapshotting picture, or the the problem with acquiring snapshots, but I think the technologies that are emerging aren't just snapshotting. So for example, you can have a satellite that passes over your landfill, your whatever you want measured pretty frequently. So in terms of acquiring snapshots, you begin to get actually a kind of library of them. So I don't know that much about that, but what I'm saying is that right now Benton County doesn't really know what's going on with the methane, and I think they should, independent of kind of the jurisdictional parts. So anyway, that's the comments that I have. Yeah.
All right.
That's where I'm at.
Thanks, Ken. So let's try to only spend a couple more minutes on recommendations so we can get to the rest of the report. And I'm specifically looking for sort of recommendations on how to change or accept or not accept items on the screen here. Chuck, I saw your hand briefly. Feel free to dive in if you want. Otherwise, let's entertain some proposals. Yeah, go for it, Chuck.
I was just saying, really, the methane is part of the county's sustainability, so that should probably be coordinated with them to see if a new technology would assist in their sustainability, since they do look at methane gas over the whole county.
Thanks, Chuck. I think the point, I think Benton County sustainability looks at county facilities and not privately owned facilities. So that was the question of, because the landfill is a privately owned facility, it's not associated with Benton County government facility, like other methane and emissions generated from county facilities are.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I don't have anything to add for that. I have a comment on the first and third red item, but I kind of wanted to resolve this second one that we're talking about currently. So I guess the question is either keep it as written, change it, or remove it, and I'm open to suggestions from the group. And Ginger, feel free to dive in since.
I mean, my recommendation would be to remove it.
Okay, any other support for that?
Yeah, I would agree.
Anyone
So
else or
well,
counter?
I'm just curious if there's a way to reword it, because I think it's an important issue. And I think it is something that the county needs to be going forward with, trying to understand the impacts of the landfill. This is kind of related to the baseline study in some ways, because it is a needed assessment of what are really the impacts.
I guess my thing is that it doesn't have anything to do with site life. It's not a recommendation that has, I mean, measuring methane is not going.
Well, it does have a basis in conversion to energy, since Coffin Butte is converting some of it to energy. The question is, can we sustain a better percentage of methane gas to energy? I guess that's another way of really looking at it within the framework of circular economy and sustainable materials management.
Thanks, Chuck, and Ginger. So Ken submitted a alternate wording, I believe, to this one, potentially as a proposal to address some of the concerns, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ken. But how do folks feel about that new version, and does that satisfy the concerns specifically that Ginger and Ian had?
Hopefully with Ken's new writing, if we add a sentence at the end that says something like that specifically addresses diversion and, looking for opportunities to divert organic material from the landfill, as those are known to be, Ken, you know what I'm saying, like just add a sentence to that ties the finding back to the idea of diversion of an organic waste, and I'll be okay with it. Should be, and how this information relates to organic material going into the landfill.
Yeah, I added that sentence on the end. I like the way you put it better. Because that was clearer. But of course I couldn't write that and listen to you and transcribe you at the same time. So how would you, Ginger, how did you like doing that last sentence, that last bit of the sentence, the last sentence?
Hold on, Kevin. How does that look? After characterize, just plunk in that chunk.
All right, we got a thumbs up from Ken. Any other thoughts on that?
Looks good to me.
And
Okay.
the only twit-like thing is, before you do that, is I'm not sure it's the word is characterized. I mean, that seems to me, I think you really, it's not quantified or not understood or not well developed. Characterization is good, bad, you really want to know more about the actual, is there a better word than characterized? Is it understood or quantified?
Or defined?
Ken, what do you think, since
I like
you're,
defined.
I'm sorry, Ginger, what was that?
I like defined.
Well, I'm just thinking, of course, that we've used this in a number of places already. So I think character, yeah, I mean, what we discussed earlier is that we want this sort of holistic overall picture of what's going on. And to me, characterize seems to be the word that gets at that the best. That you really want to because like Ian said, it's kind of a living organism. The landfill is really changing a lot. And so well-defined doesn't really kind of get at that. So.
Is it understood, not well understood? Look, I don't care one way or the other. I just didn't know what characterized means. I was thinking something more robust than saying good or bad or.
Yeah, no, so if I can jump in, I think from a technical standpoint, well characterized is understood to mean where are the sources, what's happening, what's the, if you will, the fate and transport of the methane emission. So I'm comfortable with the
great.
word. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that word from a technical standpoint.
okay. Any other thoughts on this version to replace the second one? I think we got thumbs up from the rest of the group.
Yeah, looks good.
All right. So my only other thought here is I think the first one and the third one cover a lot of the same concept. So if the group is interested in choosing one or the other, I think that would help limit the amount of recommendations for the work group to sift through that cover the same content, but I think they're both fine generally. So unless there's support for that, I'll move on.
I'm
Okay.
just trying to catch up.
Sorry, I'll give you a second.
No, it's okay.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on. So let's spend the next just couple minutes going through the rest of the report. Obviously, we focus on areas that we had. Well, let's go ahead and accept these changes while we're all together because it's exciting to finalize stuff. All right. So we have a number of proposals that are in red text throughout the document. And the real question is, how do we treat these red text items, right? How do we treat the track changes that have not been reviewed and approved by the subcommittee? So the opportunity here is to either say, let's accept the track changes as written for the rest of the document. Let's not accept track changes for the rest of the document. Or if there's any very specific areas that you don't want to accept or do want to accept, now is the time to communicate that. But I don't think we have enough time to dive in and change some stuff at this point, unfortunately. So any thoughts? I'll get to the meat of the document here. Sorry, go for it.
I was just, once we approve this, then this goes to the Benton County Talks Trash for review.
Yep.
The final with, there will be no other changes to this, or just, can you quantify what the next steps with this document will be?
Yeah, so the next steps of this document is that this document from a subcommittee perspective is going to be done with the exception of Ken and Ginger's last Appendix D work that they're going to send over to the whole group around 5 or 6 tonight. We're going to ask for group feedback via email to finalize that. But other than that, there's not going to be changes to this document.
And will this be with other subcommittees reports too?
Yeah, so these will all be included as appendices to the full subcommittee, to the full work group report. And they'll be taking this information and reviewing it when they're considering findings and recommendations.
Okay,
Considering
thanks.
how to pull on their findings recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Ken.
Yes, if we could go, it's page 53. Well, is this the full thing?
No,
that
I
isn't-
did it, just our subcommittee's work, so it should be the
I'm-
same page.
I'm looking for the Coffin Butte site life scenarios chart or
Okay,
table.
let's see. Oh, shoot, I removed that because it's not,
Not that table.
okay.
The one has the green title bar, that one right there, you just passed by
Oh.
it.
This one?
No, down a little further.
Go down, it's got green on it.
Oh, got it.
Scrolling. That one.
It's the one that has 3 columns.
Yeah, there we
Alright.
go. So thank you. So this may seem like a minor point, but I've tried putting in a few comments here. I just have issue with the word neutral there in the beginning, right there in the chart. And there's text, I think, down below that kind of clarifies what neutral means, but these items under neutral, they're not neutral. It's just that it's just, they can go one way or the other.
I think we can solve this really quickly because my understanding was this chart was going to come out of the document. It was an initial chart that we did very early on before we all agreed on the scenarios and the questions, and I don't think it's been removed. But my understanding, Sam was on a call and it was sort of like an early placeholder. So I think this is one of the things that's in the document that I think like that chart was supposed to be removed and then the language below was supposed to be tweaked, but.
So this chart has been replaced by the table that we
Correct.
did.
That was my understanding of what was supposed to happen.
Got
That
it.
makes
Okay.
sense.
Yes. So that's even better. So
How do we feel
that's
about
fine.
deleting this chart then? Good?
If Ken and Ginger agree, I'm in agreement for sure.
All right. Well, hearing none other, so I'll delete the chart. Do folks feel comfortable with me tweaking this language so that doesn't reference the chart and just makes
Yes.
sense in the context?
Yes.
Okay,
Correct.
excellent. I am also planning on just like tweaking the table references and all that in the document, and I'll try to do my best to make sure it makes sense. If that's okay with the group to sort of take that freedom and try to just make sure that the context of things are clear, but I'll do my best to not change any like functional meaning of anything. Okay, anywhere else to draw our attention to before we either accept or not accept track changes for the rest of the document? Okay, hearing none. I think we'll entertain sort of proposal on whether or not to accept or not accept changes here. I'm going to treat strike through like texts that aren't formal like track changes. I'll treat the things that were stricken through with a strike line as like something to be deleted, unless folks have any concerns about that. Yeah, anything else here? I'm kind of gonna scroll through to see if it jogs anyone's memories. Oh, I was planning on deleting this date capped close since we don't have any data to put in there, that column, if that's okay with everyone.
Well, isn't there a closure date for cell 1 and 1A?
There should be, but we haven't
There-
gathered that yet.
Yeah, it's the 1990s. I don't remember the exact years.
So what are you going to do with that information then? In other words, you were proposing to delete the entire column, right?
Correct, yeah, unless we feel comfortable with putting in some number here at this juncture, but I just don't have that data.
Ian, do you have a sense of, is it okay to put in early 1990s, mid 1990s, something like
I
that?
would put something in there, put mid 1990s. The other piece would be the closed landfill. I mean, it's been relocated into lined landfill, so it isn't capped or closed exactly, but it doesn't exist anymore either.
Right.
So I'll just add that. Any other things to add here? And we'll, does that look okay to the rest of the group?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
The only thing I would do is put some notation as to why they're blank. Is it TBD? Is it TBD, or is it something else, or so that people don't say, where's the hell's the rest of the information?
Does TBD make sense to Republic folks?
Yeah,
I'll work on that offline to save us time. Okay, anything else? I'm gonna delete all these like in progress notes and leave things where they are. If anything, I think this is one of the areas that we had the most like disagreement on how to communicate this chart. So if there's anything that just has too much disagreement and shouldn't show up at all, now's the time to communicate that. Otherwise, we would just include what isn't stricken through. Okay. And I hope everyone saw my changes to the introductory sort of definitions section. Hopefully that was clear. I'll add back in the chart that Ken and Ginger helped develop, as well as the images of Coffin Butte landfill from an aerial perspective. They were just really big files, so I left them out for emailing. And yeah, so I think that brings us to the end here. So I'm open for a proposal on either accepting the track changes as written or just not accepting the track changes as written. Any thoughts? I think the group seems to be leaning towards accepting track changes as written, since that's what you've been reviewing, but. All right, I'm seeing Chuck has a thumbs up, I guess, to accepting the track changes as written. Anybody else have concern with that?
Daniel, do you have a schedule for when you might send something out? It would be, I mean, it's really, really difficult to say carte blanche, oh yeah, everything looks fine, when I
Yeah.
don't really know what it's gonna look like.
I know it's like an
yeah.
impossible.
Right. So I'm uncomfortable in just saying, oh yeah, whatever, that sounds good.
Yeah.
But you have a sense of when you might have this cleaned up, is it possible to send it out to us before your 8 o'clock deadline tomorrow morning? Or I don't know how other people feel, but I'm uncomfortable in just saying, oh yeah, whatever.
Yeah, well, what I could do here, it sounds like Ken and Ginger are gonna send in their resolved Appendix D today. So what I'm thinking is by later on tonight. So I'll just approve the changes as written, if it's okay with the group, send that draft over to the group like later on this afternoon, whenever I'm finished up with that. So that way you have that plus Ginger and Ken's revisions. You can look at those side by side. And the goal is to not say to the group, hey, we have subtle changes to make in these sections. Because I think generally we're past that, but it gives us an opportunity to feel more comfortable to see it as written, if that makes sense. Because I will try to make those changes to clean up the document as much as possible.
But
Yeah,
there's no more time for rebuttal then, correctly? We just have to take that and run.
Well, I think if you don't agree with something in the document, you can send it to the rest of the group, and we can see how to work on that. I don't know. We don't have very much time, but
Yeah.
like if there had to be an emergency meeting tomorrow morning or something, then maybe, but we already have committed to reviewing things offline and approving it for Ken and Ginger's Appendix D. So it's possible that we can also review a very small amount of other items, but I think the goal is the goal of this meeting is to basically say, generally the document is done. We don't really have time to go through it, but I totally hear Mark's perspective that, it's very difficult to look at all these things in track change form and accept them.
Right, it's just Pandora's box.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm comfortable with doing that as soon as I can. I have another subcommittee meeting in 30 minutes that I'm going to be on for an hour and a half. So I will try my best to get that done before you get your versions from Ken and Ginger.
Well, maybe we should schedule a meeting for midnight tonight. We can all get
Yeah.
together and yeah.
I might be busy from like midnight to 1.
Love
So
that,
after
Mark.
that.
Great idea, really.
All right. So does
All right.
that sound okay? And Mark, I know that was your question. Does that work for you just to be able to
Yeah.
get that last glance at it? Okay.
Yeah, if it's in 2 pieces, that's totally doable.
Excellent. All right. Seeing thumbs up.
Do you see Ginger's comment in the chat
Oh.
as well?
I will. Yeah. I mean, I'll do what I can with the executive summary. Largely what I'm going to propose is what is there. So, but I think Sam's perspective on the executive summary might be that it doesn't really need to be in this document so much as it needs to be in the work group report. And Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, but we could just remove the executive summary from this document altogether if that makes the group feel more comfortable and just have it be located in the work group report.
Well, they are really somewhat mirror images of each other. My concept for the report's executive summary was largely to begin with taking each subcommittee's executive summary, putting it
Okay.
into the body of the report, and maybe just shortening it a little bit and cross-linking it to the actual body.
Okay. Yeah, so if there's any other thoughts on what to do to improve the executive summary, let me know. We got one comment from Chuck that I added in there, but other than that, I haven't heard any feedback. So it is largely going to look the way it looks unless folks tell me otherwise.
All right, yeah, I'll take a closer look at it, and if there's things, I can send some thoughts out to the entire group. And
Okay.
maybe Ginger, if you have some thoughts there too, it might be helpful.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for all of your hard work. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. And I think this document is, just it compiles a lot of really thoughtful, submissions from everyone. So I just really appreciate all of your time and energy and expertise in coming together and reviewing this. It's really been a pleasure. So yeah, thank you.
Agreed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yep, thanks everyone. Good to see you all today.
Likewise. Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks all.